So today we're going to talk about the Oracle Database Appliance software 19.12 release. With me is Carlos. Welcome, Carlos.
Hey, Paul. Good morning, everyone.
Okay, so here's a quick agenda. We're going to talk about July 2021 RU for the database. With our new release, we always include the latest database RUs. And then, of course, two of the new things we want to talk about is the 21C support and the database system patching support for our KVM, database in KVM, and then also some other enhancements with the 1912 release. And then we're going to do a quick demo of patching from 1911 to 1912. This is very useful because this is one of the demos that's being asked by a lot of people, right? Show us how to patch a ODA. So we're going to do that for you and see how easy and how quickly we can patch an ODA. Okay, then we'll leave some time for Q&A. So with the 1912, we're including the July 2021 database RU. So, and we support with the 21C database for the first time, but that's only going to be in DB system, in KVM, in other words. And then of course we have the 19. And actually the 18 is an error. So 18 has gone out of regular support. So sorry about that. That's an error. But 12 to 12.1 RUs are with this 1912 release. And as with 1911, we will not release an OVM release with the 1912, but we will do the final release for OVM in the 1913 release, which is coming out in November timeframe. Okay. So the 21C supports the new thing with 1912, and as I stated earlier, it's a KVM support only in our DB system. And the reason being that it's what Oracle calls an innovation release. So it only has 2 years of premium support. So most people will try the 21C more just to test it out, the new features and so forth, right? And we believe most of the customers will stay on the long-term release, which is 5 years and longer release. So that's why we just want to get it out there for customers to kick the tires on the 21C. So we'll be supporting the DB system only. And now there are some limitation first. You have to patch the bare metal to 1912 first to be able to do the 21C DB system. And then and also the DB system supports 1910 and higher. So you have to be on 1910 to be able to patch to 21C, or you can patch the bare metal to 1912 and then deploy a new 21C database in the DB system. So that's the 21C support with the 1912 ODA software. So the next thing is the DB system patching support. As you know, with the 1910 and 1911, we did not support patching of the DB system. But now with the 1912, we actually have the full functionality with the DB system now, right? Not only you can deploy new DB system, you can also patch from previous 1910 or 11. So functionality-wise, it's complete, right? So it's complete life cycle, part of life cycle management for the database in KVM now. You can create, modify, and now you can patch the DB system, okay? So those are the two new things with 1912. And then we have, of course, we always have additional things in our release. So with the 1912, we have, support for STIC, the security requirements by the government that's complying with the Oracle Linux 7. We have Numa support by default now, right? So this improved the efficiency of memory access from CPU. So again, hopefully we'll get more consistent and better performance with the Numa support. And we will support TD-enabled databases that's not done with ODA. So obviously, you could always create a database in ODA with TD-enabled. But if you had done the TD-enable with database prior to our feature, then we support that now. And then this next one is very unique to ODA. So for as you know, when you have a disk failure or you add more disks, we go through this what we call the rebalance operation, right? We restripe the data across all the drives. And this is a new feature that's in 1912 and it's unique to ODA. Nobody else has this feature, is that we could do smart rebalance. based on the workload, dynamically, we can change the rebalance operation so that when it's really busy, it doesn't rebalance as much. When it's idle, then we change the rebalancing effort. So this is really useful. Again, it's a kind of smart rebalancing operation. Look at it that way, right? And then we have.
And Paul, I want to add that on that ASM disk group rebalance, right? It's not enabled by default. Customers will need to. The instructions are in the user documentation. Go in to enable it.
That's right. That's right. Yes. Okay. So other than that, there's a lot of usability enhancements, as you can see, right? We can finally use the browser user interface for collecting diagnostic information. We have the new plugin support, Enterprise Manager plugin support. And then we also have this thing called Resource tab on the user interface now, browser user interface now. You can directly access documentation, FAQs, and blogs, right? So all the information is right there, for our users. So these are the additional enhancements in 1912. And so I think that's it. So why don't we show you how we actually patch an ODA, and it's a very impressive. And so Carlos is going to show you with a recorded video, and this is something we actually did 2 weeks ago. So we actually measure the amount of time it takes to patch an ODA. So it's very interesting. So Carlos.
Okay, so we're going to show you, right, how to patch from 1911 to 1912. That's what we had in our system, 1911, but obviously customers can come from 1910, 1909, 1908. And we're going to make some references, right, regarding older versions, but this one is 1911 to 1912. And on this slide here, you can see on the left-hand side, the steps that are required to patch an OTA bare metal. And on the right-hand side are the steps for the DB system. So we're going to show you both. We're going to start with the one on the left. And notice the first step, right, is downloading the server patch, the GI, and database clones. Remember that in the Oracle Database Appliance, we provide you with pre-tested clones to make it easier, right, to just do the updates. The second step, we're going to update the repository with the server patch. Then we update those DCS elements, right, the admin components and agent. And then we update the repository with the GI and database clones. This is important. You cannot do it before, right? It has to be after the agent gets updated, right? To update the GI and database clones. And the next steps, we're going to update the server, the storage components, and the database. And also notice in italics here, right, that there is a requirement to run the pre-checks for the server, the storage, and the database. And the reason is that we want to make sure that everything is okay, right, before you do the update. And we put an asterisk here because as a best practice, customers can run this before, say 2 days, 3 days, run it before, make sure that there are no issues. And if there are, then to address and fix them so that when they are ready to do the patching, right, then it's going to go smoother. And then the last step is enable Numa. Paul told you, right, that Numa is now enabled by default when you create a new database, DB system, application, DB system database, database home, right? But because we're coming from 1911, we're gonna need to enable the virtual machines, the database, and we're gonna show you that. So, okay, so going, so let's get started on this one, right? And just quickly, I want to show, right, that to get to the documentation, you can just in the browser or the Google, right, order release notes 1912. It'll give you the documentation here. We go to the patch a bare metal system. And right here on the left-hand side, you just see the menu in chapter 6, right? And if you see this item here, patching Oracle Database Appliance bare metal system using the command line, this is what we're gonna use. The one next to it is patching the Oracle Database Appliance DB system using the command line. We're gonna use the command line just because it's so straightforward and simple as you're gonna see, right? So those are the two main things that we're gonna be doing. And just a few words, right, on this information that we have on patching, right? It's with 1911, we support out of place patching. With 1910, we made a change to on the metadata database. We now use MySQL, right? And then the patch bundle updates all of these components that you see here, right? From all the hardware firmwares for the network cards. On Linux RPMs, we don't recommend, right, that the customers install RPMs, but they can do it. So just read the instructions carefully, right? It's how to do that. And here is the patching pre-checks. There is a lot of pre-check that we do to make sure that the patching is going to be successful. And this table just lists all of them. So this is just a quick overview, right? So you know where to go and look for this information. And then this section here about enabling Numa on the Oracle Database Appliance. As I mentioned, this is for those items that we had in 1911, right? That's the Numa. And this one is the best practices to minimize downtime, right? It's go ahead and read it later on your own time. And now here is the patching Oracle Database Appliance, right? This is the main section. So this was the web page. I'm gonna turn now into screenshots that we took from this section here, right? It's to just show you. But you can see here the first 5 steps, right? Number 1, it tells you, go ahead and download the server patch, the GI and the database clone, right? Unzip it, copy the software to the appliance. And number 3, update the repository with the server files. And it gives you the example for 1912. Now notice that you can copy these commands, and this is right, you can just copy paste into the CLI, very simple. And then just confirm that the repository is successful, right? So in this next section, I'm gonna show you all these 6 steps. But first, right, when you go to the release notes on this section here, Oracle Database Appliance 1912 patches, right? We'll list all these files, right, that are available for 1912. And just quickly, let me show you, right, that the ones that it told us to download are the first 3, right? This is the server patch, this is the GI clone, and this is the Database Appliance clone 1912. Underneath, you can see the 12.2 clone, 12.1. So for customers who want to create databases of this version, right, they will need to install these clones. We're not going to do it in this demonstration. And quickly, let me tell you the next ones, right? This ISO image, it's the file that is required to re-image a system if you want to start over. And then underneath, there are 3 more, right? This one says KVM database system template. This is required, right, if you want to create a new DB system, a new KVM for Oracle database. And it's not part of this demo, but it must be installed, okay, after the patching, if you want to do that. And the last 2 are the Oracle Database 21C, right? These are the latest, or the version is 21.3. So, and this is only for DB systems. So you will need to install these 2 clones, right? If you want to create 21C databases. And we provide a link on the patch number, and also on the right-hand side, the resources to get more information, right? It's like here, I clicked on that one, you just download it. The file was about 3.4 gigabyte, if you notice, right? It's so what I'm gonna show you here is just running the update repository, because we already had downloaded the files, we had them ready, right? And you notice here, I mean, the command, right? Update repository and provide the path to the file. We're doing the server patch right here, right? So you run it, it gives you an ID, describe the job ID, and you can, sorry, let me show you, right? You can see here that it was successful. And this, because we're on the same network, it was very quick, right? So, but for you, it's going to be quick because it's going to be on the appliance as well. So, so it was successful. We did the first steps. Now, the next steps are going to be to update the DCS items, right? The first one is the DCS admin, then is the DCS component, and here it gives you some extra information. Like if you look at, if you are coming from 1910, it's going to do more component installation from 19. If you're coming from 1910 as well, the components are going to be a little bit different, right? We are 1911 to 1912. Once you do the components, we're going to update the DCS agent. And then after that, right, after the agent is when we need to update the repository with a GI clone and the Oracle database. So let me show you that. Right, so here, right, we're updating the DCS admin. And same thing, you get an ID. So describe the job ID. And this is fairly quick tasks, right? I mean, it only took a few seconds, right? And now the DCS components. This takes a little bit more, you're gonna see. And by the way, we expedited the video, as you realize, right? So here you can see that it is successful. And one thing to realize or to know about the DCS components is that it's not part of the agent job list. What this means is that you cannot run a describe the ID, describe component ID, right? This job ID. So we're gonna bypass that, just make sure that it's successful, right? And now, right, the next step is gonna be, we're gonna update the DCS agent, right? You get the ID. So describe the job ID, and it was successful. You can see that it took almost 3 minutes, right? And we're gonna show you the total number of the time that it took for that, right? But next is gonna be to update the repository with the GI clone. So that's, you can see that on the file name, this is the GI, right? So we run that, and then we just loaded or upload the repository for the database clone 1912. We can do that at the same time, right? And notice here, I just run Aura CLI list jobs. It's gonna give me a listing of the jobs that have happened and the ones that are pending. You can see here, the first one is successful. That was the GI, and the database still running. But I can just go and describe the job, right? ID. So that's the GI is completed. And right here is the database is completed as well. So fairly quick. Now, once we haven't loaded, right? Look at step number 9. We gotta run the create pre-patch report, right? This is the pre-checks, make sure that everything is okay. And then on 10, we're gonna make sure that it runs successfully. Notice this note here at the end of step 10, right? If this is a known issue, if the pre-patch report shows this issue, then it's just telling you run the -F, right? -F, which is right here in step 11. You can see it at the end. When you update the server, it'll just bypass that known issue. Okay, and step number 12, confirm that it was successful. So we'll do that. Let's clear. And here, right, notice we're clearing a pre-patch report. -S is for the server, and it's going to be version 1912.
Yeah. So Carlos, the idea here is that we try to check for a bunch of things to make sure that the system is in the kind of prime condition for upgrade. So these are all the things we check. So yeah, to save time. Yeah.
And you can see them here, right? I mean, this is the report for the pre-check. You can see that it checks the OS, the island, the GI, and other components. Yeah. It does an Aura check as well.
Yeah, and then you can do this ahead of time before patching. So that will save you a lot of time too. So you don't even have to run this if you run this before patching. Yeah.
And yes, right. It's so we have we're doing this on a Ora X7M, a Model M, right? It's and it was everything went green for us. But if you get some issues, say on Aura check or right, always refer to known issues in the release notes, right? But for us, it went successful. This is the pre-check. Once the pre-check is done, right, it's then we're gonna update the server. But before then, I wanted to show you this, right? Notice the command Aura CLI describe component. It'll just tell us what version the ODA is running and also what components need to be updated. I run this after the DSC items. Otherwise, you would have seen here, right, that this were 1912 needed to be updated. But right now, you can see that the appliance kit, the GI, and the database are the ones that need to be updated. So we're gonna do the server, and I'll show you after we do the server, right? So here you can see, right, Aura CLI update server to version 1912. Once we confirm the pre-check already, then we just update the server. We get a job ID. Notice that it'll reboot. And so here, right, this is after it finished. And I'll show you how long it took. But you can see here that the connection was closed, right, because it rebooted the server. Or yeah, right. So we connect again. We look at the job ID, and you can see all the tasks that were performed to update the server. Paul, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I just want to also mention that we're showing you the command, everything in command line just to show you the details, but you can do the update server from the browser user interface, just a point and click. There's a button saying the update server, just click that instead of typing all the commands. But we want to show you all the steps, you know, but you could do this in the graphic user interface as well. Just point and click, yeah.
Definitely. And I mean, just to show these tasks here, you can see the value, right? It's the Oracle Database Appliance provide. It just saves a lot of times to the administrators to have to do all this manually.
Yeah.
Okay, and so now I'm going to describe the component again, and you can see here that the first two items, right, OC and GI, are already up to date. This is what the update server did. And the one that remains is the database. So that's what we're going to do next, right? So we run.
Right, but up to, yeah, I was going to say up to this point, this is the same exercise every customer have to do when they patch an ODA, because this is the infrastructure, right? This is the firmware, the OS, the GI, the grid infrastructure. So up to this point, everyone has to go through this. The next part of patching the database, that may depend on the customer's environment, right? We just have one small database, but other customers can have 20 databases, right? Then they have to do them individually. So up until this point, the time is fixed, right? It's about an hour to do this. And then after that, when you do the database patching or upgrade, then that time is going to vary depending on the customer's environment. Yeah.
Yes, good point, Paul. Right. It's and I want to mention that if a customer is going to choose to upgrade a database, we're not showing that here, but that obviously takes longer, right, than just patching a database.
Right.
We did one in this model, the M system, and it took about an hour and 40 minutes.
For upgrade.
Yeah. For upgrade, right? Like from 12 to 19. Yes. It's a more complex task.
Yeah. And patching is about 20 minutes. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. So on next step on the guide, you can see here, right? 13, create a pre-patch report. Well, I should have mentioned, right? I said the database is next, but in reality, next is the storage. In the components, you saw that there wasn't anything to update, but always tell customers, follow the steps, right? And the next step is the storage, because you just don't know, right? If something if our developers are going to be updating some minor stuff that is not reflected. So always run this. So we're going to run the pre-patch for the storage. 14, verify that it's successful. 15, run the update storage to version 1912, as you can see here. And then step 16, we're going to run this or configure the database home storage, right? With 1911, now we do out of place patching, and the database homes are sitting on the data disks, right? It's so we're gonna run this, and this started with 1911. We're patching from 1911, so we really don't need to do this. But I want to show you, right? Because the 1908s, 1909, 1910s will need to run this. Okay, so let's go ahead and so here, right? We're creating the pre-patch. -st is the storage, right? So we're creating the pre-patch, and right, it gives you the whole command there to just copy paste and run it. And this one, since there wasn't any component, it only took like 10 seconds, right? Now we're gonna update the storage to version 1912, and right, if it, I mean, in some cases it'll trigger a reboot, but here, because there wasn't anything, you can just see that it only took like 6 seconds.
Hey, Carlos, you can see kind of what things they do in this step, right? You can say apply firmware dispatches, right?
Yes.
So these are the things, if there's a new firmware for the disk, so this is when it's happening, yeah.
Correct. But again, nothing here. So it just went through the steps in only 6 seconds. Right. So, and this is the step, right? Configure database home storage. This is for when you go to 1911, but we're already there. So it just gives you, hey, this is created, no changes are allowed. So, okay, just wanted to show you that. And with that done, right, the next step, 17, is, okay, we need to patch the existing Oracle database homes to 1912. It tells you to update the repository as a reminder. We don't need to because we already did it on step 9. Okay, then on C, notice that if you get, this is another known issue on database home patching. If you get this issue, it just tells you run -f as we did with the server. Okay, and so let me show you that part, right? So first we list what database homes we have, right? That's the ID is 1911. And the command is create pre-patch report, the database home ID, right, to version 1912. And it is creating the pre-patch. Again, you get the whole command there to get it. So at this point, it was still running. A few minutes later, you can see right here, you can see that everything was successful. And we'll show you the time again, right? So we didn't have any issues. Same note, if your customer, right, runs into an aura check, tell them to check the known issues in the release notes. Now, here at the bottom, you can see update database home, the same database home ID to version 1912. So we are now patching the database home on this step right here.
Yeah, so in this process, because we're using RHP, so it's out of place patching now. What it is that we actually create a 1912 home and basically direct the database to point to a new home, thereby patching the database to the latest version. But the old database from 1911 is still there. So this is, again, just to make it safer when you patch. You're not doing anything to the existing database home. So this is fairly new things from like 1911, I believe, right?
Yes,
so
1911.
Yeah.
And here I ran describe the job. You can see that it was successful, the tasks that were done, and the database home is patched. Notice the time 3:26 to 3:33, so it only took about 7-8 minutes for this. Okay, and now the next step, right, is Numa. And on 19, the database needs to be enabled, right? So we're gonna connect to the database on SQL and issue this command to enable it. And then on step 20, if we have DB systems, VMs, or CPU pools, we also need to enable them. So we have a CPU pool for the DB system, so we need to run remap CPU pools. And then on B, we have a DB system. We're gonna enable it as well. We don't have any application VM, so we're not gonna do the last step, right?
So this is only because we're patching from 1911 to 1912. If you create anything new in 1912, Numa is enabled by default, so you don't have to do anything. But if you have any existing database, application VM, or DB system, then you have to do these steps. So only if you're coming from before 1912. But anything new going forward will be automatically enabled.
Exactly. And so here, right, we're listing the database that we have. So you can see here is DB1, right, with that ID, and it's already, well,
patched to 19.
So it's 1912 already, right? So that's the one. So we need to connect to the DB1, right? So here are the commands connecting to it. And then you just copy paste that command, SQL command to enable Numa, and done, right? Then we gotta shut the database down and then restart it to make sure that the changes take effect, right? So we are shutting down here and we're starting the database again here. And done, right, for the database. The next step was, okay, then we need to remap the CPU pools. This is very quick, right? We just run that command. Now describe the job so you can see that is done, and you can see that it only took about 1 second, right? It's and the next step is that's the list of our DB systems. We have one, right? That's the DBS1. So we need to also modify the DB system, enable Numa, right? And the name is the DBS1. Again, very, very quick to do this, right? And okay, no, let me show you right here, right? So that's describing the job. It's done, right? This one took about a little bit than 2 minutes, right? And if we just describe the components, you're gonna see that everything is up to date. Now, Paul mentioned, look at this here in the database section, right? It says home 1 and home 2. And one is 1911, 1912, right? Paul mentioned about out-of-place patching, that when we patch a database, we're gonna create a new home, that's the home to 1912, and it'll patch it on that one, right? The home 1 remains, that's why you see it there, and it says that it's available for 1912. In a future release, we're gonna be deleting this, but this is not used, right? The home 1. So we just wanted to show you that everything is up to date. Okay, that's the database home. Now we're gonna log into the GUI to just show you a different view. And Paul, as you mentioned, right, in the future, maybe we can also just record patching, doing it from the GUI. But CLI is very straightforward.
Yeah.
Right, here you can see that it's 1912. You can go to the patch manager, see that all the components are updated, right? And DB systems, we have a DBS1, and in the next section, right, we're gonna show you. This is 1911. We're gonna show you how to update it, but we want to show you the time that it takes. Right, like the first step, download the server patch. On all these 3 files, you're talking about maybe around 15 gigabytes. So this can be done way before, right? You even patch. Then updating the repository, look at the DCS admin, just a few minutes. updating the repository with GIDB clones. That was about 5 minutes. Look at the update server, because we had to reboot that around 3 minutes. So the total is about 38 minutes if you run the pre-check plus update the server. The storage, in this case, I mean, it took just a few seconds because there weren't any updates, right, in this 1912 release. The database, it took about 18 minutes, Numa about 5 overall. So total, right, is about 73 minutes, but keep in mind, this is a single node and we only had a single small database. Next, we're gonna show you the patching the DB system, right? And this is much shorter. You can see there is a subset of the steps that are on the left-hand side, right? It's and as Paul mentioned, right, you have to go through the left steps before you can do this, right? Patching the bare metal. So let us show you that. Same thing, right? We just took a screenshot of the steps that you find in the user guide, patching the Oracle Database Appliance DB system using the CLI. Notice on step number 1, it tells you, hey, you gotta make sure that you downloaded all of these files, which is what we did already. And then it tells you run the Ora CLI describe DB system image just to make sure that those are in there. So we're gonna run this to show you. And this is done in the bare metal system, right? Number 2 is gonna be connect to the DB system, right? It has a different IP address, so we're gonna connect to that one. And then you update the same DCS items, right? The admin, the component, and the agent. So that's what we're gonna do. So first, let's run the DB system image. And let's stop here for a few seconds to just describe this, right? It wanted to make sure that, hey, that it says that it is available. So the GI and the database are available. So that's done. We are set, right, to continue with the next step. But I want to explain this one here, DBVM. It says not available. When I show you the files that are available for 1912 patches, I told you that there was one that was the DBVM template. If you want to create a new database system in 1912, you have to update the repository with that DBVM template, right? That's why it says not available right now, but once you update it, it'll display the 1912. And I also show you the 21.3 clones, right? If you want to create those database versions, you need to upload the repository for those clones. That's why it says here not available. So we're ready, right, with to proceed with the next step. So updating the DCS admin. This is same stuff that we did on the previous. So I'm just gonna let it run quickly.
Yeah. So I just want to make sure everyone understands this is done in the VM now, in the DB system. You have to. It's not. We were doing things on the bare metal, but here you have to actually go inside the virtual machine to run these commands.
That's a good point, Paul. I should have mentioned, right, that see here on the upper on the top of the screen, you can see 2 tabs on the CLI, right? When I was showing you to describe the system image, I was on this one on the left, right? That was the bare metal. But now we're on the right-hand side, which is the DB system. Good.
You can see the IP addresses are different too, right? From the tab.
Yeah, 86, 85. So this is updating the DCS admin. It shows here that it's successful, right? Now we're gonna update the component, right? Confirm that it's successful. And then we update the DCS agent, right? So same steps as the previous, but on the DB system, right? Confirm that it's successful. Right, this is still running. Wait a couple of minutes and run it again. And you can see here that it's successful, right? So that's done. Then you go to the right to the server, right? We have to create a pre-patched report again, right? Make sure that that everything is okay. 7, that it was successful. 8, right? We need to update the server, and 9, confirm that it was successful. So let's do that. right? So here is the pre-patch. Notice it's for the server -s. All right, we get that link, confirm. So here we're still running, right? So waited a few more minutes and now everything is successful, right? The pre-patch went okay, right? So now we can do update the server to version 1912, as you can see in that command, right? It's and again, it rebooted. We connect again to the Oracle Database Appliance, describe the job, and you can see, right, it's successful. All the tasks were done.
Right. So this was updating all the OS components inside the KVM, the database KVM. And then when it reboot, it actually just restart that KVM, the virtual machine. Yeah.
Good point. Okay, so it was all successful. I'll show you the times again. So next is now we go to the Oracle database, right? It's again, it tells you update the repository, but we've already done that. Right, then we gotta run the pre-check, and then on C, we gotta update the database home, right? So let's do that.
Yeah, the point I want to make here is that when you update the repository, basically you're copying the binary over to the ODA. For DB systems, like the database in KVM, the repository is actually sitting in the bare metal. So you don't, so therefore, when you do the update the repository, for example, if you want to create a 21C database, you have to update the repository in the bare metal, but you do the database creation inside the KVM. Yeah.
Right. So we list the DB homes that we have in there. That's the ID, right? We're going to create a pre-patch report for that DB home ID 1912, and right, run that command, and you're going to see that, well, it was still running here, but on this next one, it's all successful as well, right? So the pre-patch is done. Now, we list the DB homes, and notice that when running the pre-patch, right, it created the 1912 just to make sure that everything was going to be okay. And this will simplify the next step, right, which is update the DB home, same ID, right, 1912, and wait a little bit, describe the job. And you see that, right, that it was successful. It took about 8 minutes. Okay, so we'll look at the time. And here is our database, 1912, updated. And that was just highlighting the database home ID, right? So you can just see that it's already sitting in that 1912, 196, 196. It's sitting on that 1912 DB home. And to compare the time, you can see what it took, right, to patch a DB system, right? The components, the server, 24 minutes, right, when you run, if you run that pre-check at the same time, and the database about 22 minutes, right? That's what it took. So it was about 15 minutes. And remember, this is per DB system, right, that you've got to run. So, I mean, this is the end of the demo. Feel free to ask questions. And I see some questions on the chat already. Oh, Paul, already you answer. Skip, you answer some. Thank you. The database home 1 and 2 path look the same. Is DB home on the data disk group? Yes, it is, right? It's on the ACFS. Yeah, Paul, any comments or
yes, let me double check. I know on the bare metal, all the database homes are moved over to the ACFS, which is in the data disk group. Now in the DB system case, I believe those DB database homes are actually in the VM itself. but obviously the DB system themselves are sitting, because they're KVM, so they are sitting on the ACFS, which is data. So it's true that it is on ACFS, but it's inside the database KVM. So because the database KVM or DB system is a fixed 200 gigabyte size per DB system. So, and the only thing that they have in there is the DB home, because the database themselves are actually outside the DB system, are sitting on ASM. So that's the DB system architecture.
Yeah. So we had a question that in what portion of patch FIPS is being enabled? It's in the server portion.
Yeah, when you update the server, right, to 1912.
It's in the server. And then we have an honest comment here from Hatcheksha. This is a pure fantasy. I've been patching Oracle for 5 years, and every single time it results in severity 1 SRs and downtime for days, weeks. Please reach out to us. Let's talk about it. I mean, yes, we've had some issues, right? It's but we would like to learn from you. Let's get more details. As we said here, this is a single node. It's a single database. Customers have more complex environments that will take more time, definitely. But please reach out.
And my comment is that if you look at all these pre-checks, right? So like we have pre-check for server, pre-check for storage, pre-check for database homes, even for DB system, same thing, right? So those things are exactly what we're trying to avoid, is that we want to check a bunch of things, right? And it keeps getting improved, these pre-checks and the Aura checks, is that we want to prevent any potential issues, right? We want to catch them ahead of time. And that's, in the last 2 years, we've been really focusing on catching things before you actually start patching, right? So that's why you see all these pre-checks, right? And then you could do them ahead of time, right? So then your patching time is actually even less, because you've done all the checks already and fixed all the issues that patching may run into. Again, we understand, we're not going to catch everything.
Yeah.
But when Carlos and I did it for 1911 to 1912 patching, we literally did not run into any of the issues, right? Now, obviously, customer environment will be different, but we really think, 1912 is a good release, because again, we did not run into any simple issues, right? Everything was successful, right?
Yeah, but we got to find out. I mean, I'd like to talk to, I don't know what the name is, this person, because look, we have partners, right? They have hundreds of systems, and those customers are so happy that because the partners are doing the management for them, and they know, right? They do all the patching. And I've encountered customers that missed a step, and yes, that created some issue with some customers. But I would like to hear what your story is, definitely. So next question is, since patch 1911 has several problems, would it be better to go directly from 1910 to 1912? Absolutely, you can do that, right? It's yes.
Yeah, just to add to Carlos' comment, right? What we're finding is, we have a couple key partners that they have a lot of happy customers, because it's managed service, right? So they manage the environment for them, and they're very knowledgeable about ODAs. Now, obviously, when customers do it themselves, there's a lot of customization they do in their environment. And that's what we found a lot of times. It's like whether they change the security policy or they install some random software, and then, it pushes the system more into these corner cases, right? Whereas the partners that we work with, they say, oh, all their customers are happy, they keep buying ODAs, because they have a very controlled environment. So they know if they do the way they do it, they're not going to run into these corner issues, right? So that's also the struggle that we face. It's just that when you do a lot of customization, then you tend to break things, right? So, and we're trying to be that's why all these pre-checks, right? To make sure that the environment is kind of what we expect when we do the patching.
Correct. And Peter is asking if FIPS is enabled by default starting in 1911, if there is a way to leave it disabled on subsequent patches. In the current design, no, but we're looking into it, Peter. And I'm planning to get back to you on it. We're talking with the development team, but the answer is no in the current design. Okay. And we also moved to a new blogging platform. If you just search for Oracle Database Appliance blogs, you're going to find different blogs in there. There is another way to reach us, right? Just go to FAQs, for example. We're going to be putting some on patching, but just feel free to add your questions in there as well. But or go to the account team, ask them, and they'll get to us. Okay, so if no more questions, I think, Paul, then that's it for the moment.
Yeah, we're at the top of the hour anyway. So yeah, thanks for attending, everyone.
Thank you very much.